Growth in a business is constantly evolving. We look at partnerships as a highly and hotly debated topic, and people are always questioning the value of the partnerships, where they live in the value chain, and how they should be built. And so with that in mind, the three gentlemen here have various experience from very large companies to also building these partner programs from scratch. And so when we think about how do we start, if we're at a relatively new company trying to architect this model, and I know right now, Paul and Bader, you're kind of in the middle of that journey right now, the companies you're at. Where do you start? Who do you partner with? Is it the CRO? You know, what are the things that you look at from an attributes point of view? So why don't we start with Paul?
Well, thank you. And thank you for having us here today, Laura, as well. So, yeah, I mean, from my perspective at Jasper, you know, we're in a young, aspiring, you know, generative AI startup. We have about 150 employees or so today, and about $100 million worth of revenue. So we're on this rocket ship, and you know, how we scale the business and how we take things forward is really critically looked at in terms of every aspect, in terms of how we go to market and the things that we do. From a partnership perspective, for me personally, you know, partnering with our CRO very early on, Shane, who you know had been at WalkMe and a few other organizations as well, saw the importance early on in terms of, hey, and coming to me, I've built these programs before. I can only hire so many salespeople all at once and go after certain types of markets and verticals and those types of things. How do we scale this in such a way where we can take our technology and start to sell through a lot of these kind of new channels and things? So for us, we kind of decided, based on the energy, I won't say hype, around generative AI and the things that we can do there, to really focus in on our API, on our technology stack and things that we're doing in this space, and how do we scale ourselves and scale our capabilities through other SaaS platforms and other tools and things of that sort, which is a little unique in terms of really where to start in terms of the channel program, because I've seen it done in different ways. But that's kind of one of the areas that we focused on first was how do we bring our tech stack to fruition as we start to build more capabilities and have more of a draw into the Jasper application in and of itself.
And one follow-up question to that, Paul, is like, how are you measuring success? So when you're partnering with the CRO, what is he looking for from a metric perspective?
Yeah, so for us, it was really looking at this in terms of a new revenue stream on the most part. And how do we create a new set of addressable market for Jasper to go after? For a lot of our sales reps, we have about 15 of them or so today. There's only so much that they can sell in terms of licenses and the actual tool of Jasper. But how do we start to get into things like automations and where the work is being done? That increase in terms of the ACV or the contract value, the increase of that revenue, as well as our qualified leads and things that we can bring in from our partnerships and things, were two kind of key metrics that we're measuring very early on and still to today.
Awesome, thank you. Bader?
Yeah, so thank you again for having us here. Coming from big companies to small company now in the generative AI space, there's a lot of confusion in Gen AI, obviously. There's a lot that's happening. And making sense of that and making the customer's journey in Gen AI simpler is really what we wanted to build at Vectara. So, you know, being a Gen AI company and one that empowers and enables companies to infuse Gen AI capabilities and functionalities into their solution, the lens that we came at it with is how do we ensure that we're aligned to the touch points of the end customer to do two things. One, how do we accelerate the PLG motion? And how do we bring something additive to the go-to-market motion? That was the lens that we came at this with and the way that we've designed the partner ecosystem program. And looking at those insertion points is really, really critical to your point, right, around how do you align your tech stack at the end of the day. One of the analysts, you might have heard of him, Jay McCain, right, talks about there's 20 different touch points that a customer has. And on average, there are 7 partners involved with your end customer. They're the new trusted advisor. How do you align to your customer's ecosystem is the starting point. Now, who do we partner with? You know, partner with the revenue leader, the sales leader. Partner with the product leader, the CTO, the CPO. And again, it's all about aligning your emotions with those two end results. How do we accelerate PLG motion through an ecosystem play? And how do we actually accelerate or bring something additive to the go-to-market motion? Because, we talk about 1 + 1 = 3 in partnerships and how do we bring in better together value proposition. But at the end of the day, if it's not serving something to, for a customer, we're not creating value for the end customer, who cares? So that's the lens, and that's the partnerships that we have internally.
Awesome. And Jamie, I know you've obviously at Box helped build that engine up, and then now you're at a bigger company where you kind of took something over and re-architecting it. So I'd love to kind of understand kind of those perspectives that you've had to do.
Sure. And thanks also for having me here. It's just beautiful setting. Really appreciate being here today. As I heard both Paul and Bader talking about their kind of early partnership motions, it made me think of, in your question, Laura, how do you think about partnerships? Who do you partner with internally? How do you get them to choose to partner with you? I think all of us in this room are probably familiar with the fact that it is many times easier to sell something to an existing customer than it is to sell something to a brand new customer. And so at its core, I think of partnership as hinging on that concept, which is there is someone out there who already has a relationship with a customer that you would like to sell your product or service to. How do you partner with them so that you're selling a new product or service to an existing customer as opposed to, going into a completely cold conversation? And if you can get, to Bader's point, whether it's your revenue leader, your product leader, ideally both, to buy into that vision, I think it makes a lot of sense for the company to get behind it and support it.
Right. And we were talking last night, and you said something that was super interesting. So we've all worked at several companies, and the role of partnerships and the expectation around the return changes by the company you're at. And I think our job is a lot kind of understanding, what those expectations are for what we're going to build. And you were talking last night, Jamie, around when you joined Dropbox, right? And how at Box you were doing a lot of ISV and so forth, and how you didn't do that as much at Dropbox. So I'd love you to share a little bit about that, because I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah, everything we do ultimately should lead to a revenue outcome, right? The entire organization is driving toward a revenue outcome, at least in for-profit organizations, right? And so I think different organizations think about how partnership contributes to that revenue outcome differently. Some of them, such as when you and I were at Box, Laura, felt like being able to show that you had this vibrant ecosystem of interoperable you could use Box with any solution out there. There was a strong belief that did eventually, even if in an indirect fashion, lead to revenue outcomes. I think I've found in my current role that the organization wants to see direct revenue outcomes, and that's fine. There are different times and places for different things, and so as a partnership or business development leader, you adapt to that. And so in this case, my team at Dropbox is much more focused on direct revenue generation, because that's what's valued right now.
Right. One question that I've spoken to several of the leaders here from our portfolio companies and others, there's always asking, well, we're the small company, how do I partner with the big guys? How do I leverage, either the hyperscalers or a large company and actually help me drive revenue or more pipeline? And so I know all of you have actually been at larger companies, and now smaller companies. And so thinking through what advice would you give, to a smaller company trying to partner with a larger one, and maybe some examples of things you've seen done well. So I don't know. Paul, do you want to?
Yeah. So coming from the Cisco and from Zoom, those two organizations had a fairly well established platform, customer base, had a very good understanding in terms of the personas we're going after and the types of things that we knew we could sell to and sell with as well. And so when we were looking at different types of partners and partnerships to focus on, it was really important for us to focus in on partners that could really fill a gap for us in terms of either a technology type of capability or a vertical or a capability that we weren't going to go build. And I will preface that by saying, and I agree with the gentleman here too, in terms of partnering with product on that conversation as well, because that's often what I found as a learning is you get into a trap sometimes when product isn't at the table and there's a feeling or a sentiment of, hey, we need to out-innovate or we need to build certain things. And for partnerships and for the ecosystem, that can get a little tumultuous in terms of how you bring them in, how you cultivate them, how you work with them, if you're always trying to compete with them as well. And so having a really clear understanding and communication in terms of what that partnership needs to look like is something that I find that I've also now I'm on the other side in terms of the small company wanting to work with the big ones of always trying to reinforce, with the large hyperscalers. And in our sense at Jasper, it's just Google today, and we're being hyper-focused on that partner today, right now. And so where we fill the gaps, what are the things we're doing around the large language models with generative that are above and beyond what Google, who manufactures these things, is going to do as well, is critically important in terms of how we convey that to their sales team, to their partner teams, and to others, and how we can really scale this thing together. So having that clear set of communication, I find, is really kind of keen, and oftentimes being willing to have those uncomfortable conversations too of, hey, this is something we're going to go to do, and we're just going to have to agree to compete in the market, or there's going to be some additional, capabilities and things that we can do together that's going to make this combination for both of our organizations, worthwhile to work on. So,
yeah, I mean, to add to that, right? I mean, it's funny, like working at Cisco, working at Google, and coming at it from the lens, as well as Twilio, coming at it from the lens of the bigger guys and trying to work with the smaller, partners. It's every founder, every startup says they have the best thing since sliced bread. Great. Help me as the big guy at that point, right? Figure out what my better together story is, not just from a business value proposition, but what is that technical differentiator where my product and your product really creates stickiness for both of us? That's one lens. Also, the big guys, right? And I'll give you an example at Google, right? Knowing what your core versus context is around your product strategy. What do you really, the whole build by partner discussion, the partner, the product strategy there. Knowing what how high up in the stack you want to go, what you need to have as a core that's something that you're building versus where partners can complement, and to your point of ISVs, technology partners, how they can complement your product line. Being very crisp about that and having those conversations, sometimes they will be uncomfortable because it's a co-opetition. There's perceptions of co-opetition there, or competition even. Case in point, at Google, we had one of the things I was working on was the whole build by partner strategy around the data protection ecosystem. And there were two things that we're trying to solve for. One is, where in the stack do we want to go to actually have a solution around data protection, and who should be in that ecosystem, and if and when we were going to buy somebody, who would that be? Assuming we're going to buy versus just build. But also the bigger point was we had customers that were blocked from coming onto GCP because of lack of certain integrations. So we're trying to solve for those two problem statements at the same time. And what we ended up doing is actually having conversations with select number of ISVs, literally geeked out on the whole product to product engineering, had a conversation, unpacked the heck out of the tech stack, and really to just rationalize how do we work together. And ultimately, actually, one of the partners ended up being an acquisition. But the point here is make it easy for the bigger guys to bring you into those kind of conversations. make it easier for the bigger guys to have a discussion at the sales engagement, at the customer engagement level, right? Because they have a ton of partners reaching out to them saying, hey, engage me, engage me, engage me. Smaller ISV, smaller startups. King in the hyperscalers is consumption. Look at how your solution is driving the end customer's consumption, not your own instance of a consumption on the cloud provider, but the end customer's consumption. The more you're able to articulate that, the more you're able to architect your solution to actually do that, the better traction you'll get, because that's king at the end of the day for the hyperscalers. So look at what drives them, have the conversations, and be very intentional and deliberate about where you fit into the stack or how you could fit into the stack, and make it easier on the bigger guys to engage you, because the onus is on you whether you like it or not as a smaller guy.
Right.
Yeah, I'll preface that or add to that is, from our perspective, trying to get Google's attention in terms of not just the revenue that we're creating, but also the types of opportunities that we can create for them, because traditionally, a lot of the Google sellers aren't targeting CMOs or marketing teams or marketing departments and things like that. And so we could get them into new opportunities and new personas and things within the account. But as we started to move up market, it became even more and more critical to showcase that over and over and over, almost like weekly calls with their teams, like, hey, this is what we're doing, this is what value we're adding, these are the accounts we're bringing you in. And just to get that flywheel going, which now it's moving, but it took us like a good 4 to 6 weeks to get to that point of the trust and getting that momentum going as well.
Yeah, I mean, trust is earned. Like, it takes, some of the partners that came onto the GCP marketplace when we were starting working on that. There are some partners that sat back and, startups that thought, oh, I'm in the marketplace, I have my distribution channel going, it's going to sell the heck out of its own. It didn't. The ones that actually were successful was the smaller partner, ISV, that did the work, did the grunt work, went and found their champion or two, secured a couple of joint wins, and then the flywheel effect happened, because now everyone is like, wait, how did you do this? How did you unblock your customer from coming in and bringing the bigger, GCP workload or their workload into GCP? Well, I used this partner, I worked with this partner, and you got to figure out that very crisp, clear messaging, joint value proposition early on, and the onus is on you, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, very true.
It's why I think you have to be so thoughtful as the smaller company in choosing who you want to partner with. To Paul's point, you need to fill a gap for them. If you can't really fill a gap, you may be spinning your wheels trying to invent a gap. They will be able to know that there's not a gap. And to Bader's point, once you do think you found a gap that you fill for them, it takes a lot of work to actually demonstrate that that's true, and you've only got so much time and so many resources. So you want to really be thoughtful about that analysis up front and choose who are the handful of partners that you're willing to do the work for.
Yeah. I think what we're all saying is we have to show there's value there, right? I think that we take that for granted because we know in our head why we think we want to do it, but we have to really prove that value to the partner. And then second is, when you're small, you got to do the work. I mean, the onus will be on us to actually push the field, do the marketing, build that momentum, and we can't expect the larger partner to do that for us. I know we only have a few minutes, but I'd love, since all of you have a wealth of experience, I wanted to ask you, in your experience, what was your favorite partner story? Like, whether it was a partnership or a program that you built, and why is it your favorite?
Starting with me.
Yeah.
So, well, I mean, one that I'm really proud of is the ISV program that we built at Zoom. There's some representatives of that program in this room today. That's from the ground up. We really kind of just started from the very beginning, right at the beginning of the pandemic when this thing started, and so we had some things kind of working for us and all that. But I often felt that I had probably, and my team did, probably the best job at Zoom to learn about all these ISVs and companies that wanted to build a whole business on Zoom. Like things that they would come up with and ideas, from, a mom and pop, creating a yoga, class online to, transforming healthcare and doing biometrics through a video call. I mean, there's so many things that we got to learn and go see that it was tough for me to take that step and move away from that. But to see, like, as that program has continued to flourish is something I'm really proud of.
And I'm sorry for taking you away from him. He can blame me. He worked for me at Zoom, so that's my fault. But anyway.
For me, it's the partnership between Box and IBM. I think it is a great example of a lot of the things we're talking about. We had identified a real gap that Box was able to fill for IBM. They had an enormous sales force. We're doing, I don't know, 90 billion in revenue at the time, and they put their arm around us and walked us into deals. But again, because we were providing real value, we did put in the work. In fact, we dedicated like 40 people to the partnership at Box at the time, out of a team of, I don't know what we were, maybe 1,200 people. So anyway, it was kind of the quintessential example of this in my mind.
Awesome.
I mean, there's so many examples, like highlights, right? Between joint opportunities that we've won together, Cisco and partners, where we built really true deep trust, right? Or co-innovations of new solutions. And one of the things I'm really proud of is the partner nurturing one of the partners in ISVs that actually ended up being acquired by Google. That was a really cool highlight. The thing that I'm really excited about is now the opportunity to come in and actually build this, and as go-to-market leaders right here in the room, partnerships has always gotten that bad rep in a sense, right? Because it's misunderstood for the most part. And again, the onus is on us as partner leaders to articulate that, but it's also to align to the customer opportunities and again, those insertion points. And one of the things I'm really proud of now is that I'm building this holistically. It's a holistic go-to-market approach, and building this without what I want to call baggage, right? Because sometimes we allow the systems and the processes and the tools to kind of hold us, weight us down. And being able to build a partner program and a motion that actually co-creates value at the end of the day for and with our customers is huge. And one of those things is like, okay, how do we empower? Because of where we are in our industry, we're on Gen AI, and the confusion that's happening in Gen AI and just the complexity. How do we simplify that for the startups, the ecosystem, actually infuse Gen AI functionality and really focus on their core competencies? So I'm really proud of what we're going to achieve and what we've started achieving at Vectara, and look forward to empowering the ecosystem in that space as well. So yeah.
I mean, I think for me, and I know we're out of time, but just kind of sum it up. Like if you just think about the customer journey in general, I think the most successful companies understand how to embed partnerships within that journey in an organic way and do it from the beginning. And you have to be very selective and clear about where you want that to be. Because what will happen is then you're going to find the teams are going to be thrashing internally. Like, where do I include partners? When do I include it? Why do I include it? But if you're prescriptive about it, that's when you can really get that force multiplier and make it really work for you. And we've seen that at every successful company in the Valley. I don't think we can name one that does not have a strong partner ecosystem. They all do, right? And so I think the earlier that you start thinking about it, I think it's the better. So with that, open it up to questions. Any questions? Yes.
So one of the questions that we always struggle with is like, it's really hard to land really good partnerships, and then you have to do a lot of work because that's the start of the relationship. How do you motivate internal teams to, because you have to come up with structures. Let's say you had a great partnership with IBM, with Google. How do you then motivate internal teams to make sure that their reps are trained, incentivized, and constantly motivated to be selling Jasper and Box? How do you make that happen internally?
How do you motivate the internal teams to support the partnership?
Yeah.
I think you need to paint the vision of what's possible if this goes well, but painting a vision of what's possible only goes so far. So I think you need to give your teams religion by having them have the positive experiences. And so you need to realistically paint the vision of what's possible, but not oversell. And then you need to take a bit of an incremental approach, which is, hey, we're piloting this thing with these few sellers in this region, and if it works, right? That I mean,
Yeah.
you know, the
You do
people
have-
on this panel can tell you it'll
Yeah.
spread.
It will, yeah. You do have to incent them, though. There has to be, like, money.
Yeah.
Right? There has to be money there.
To try it.
So they have to be compensated in a way to be able to interact with that partner, whether it be a spiff or it's part of the quota or whatever that is. And it depends on the motion with the partner, right? If it's a co-sell, resell, whatever that may be. But you do have to build that into the incentive structure in some way.
Yeah, one thing we do at Jasper is every Friday it's like a partnership office hours. And all of our reps, all of our SEs and CS people join that. And it's an opportunity and you'd think because of the title, like I'm doing all the talking, I want the reps to be doing the talking. And that conveys so much more color and emphasis in terms of like what's happening, because I'll have a rep say, I went through this with Google, this was the struggle I had, but guess what? This is the type of interaction I had, and this is the type of deal I just did. And that could do so much more than me going to each rep individually and talking to them. So yeah, the incentive got us to that point, but then second, like how they share it amongst each other and just kind of reinforcing something like that is so much more powerful. And it took me a while to learn that as well, because you feel like, well, I'm the partnership leader, like I gotta go drive that, right? But having the reps feel empowered that they can share this, and then they get propped up and they see, oh, and then they get a little bit competitive, like, well, why did JM get that deal and I didn't? So, those types of things, I just kind of like set the fire and just kind of let it go once it's done.
The one thing I would add, though, I mean, in addition to incentive is important, by the way. But early on, as you're investing in your partnership motion, and again, you're trying to build this holistic go-to-market approach of how you're approaching customers, just like you're looking to remove friction for your customer, engaging with your solution, look at how you're going to remove friction for your sellers themselves. So if you don't have comp neutrality, not just incentivizing the partner to sell with you or engage with you or co-sell with you, but your actual sellers, if there's any point of friction, right? If it's a PLG motion or whatever it may be, partnerships will not succeed. So you got to empower your internal sellers, not just the external sellers, to look at this and say, you know what? I can go either way and actually do what's best for my customer, because at the end of the day, I'll be made whole. That's an important point to make sure we all look at as go-to-market leaders.
Hi, I'm Holly, head up marketing for Stackhawk. So we're less than 10 million in revenue, 45 folks, and we've got a great enterprise channel partner in Sneak, which is we're in the cybersecurity space. So we're at a space where sometimes those partnerships get defined and built from the top down, like they're identified by a biz dev person, but sometimes they're built from your tactical partner person who's doing co-marketing with 5 or 6 different folks. And so when you don't have that biz dev person, I'd love to know, what does successful partnership look like between marketing and sales? Because it's, we're in a place where sales reps are trying to build relationships with the reseller and the partners who have their territories. We've got partner marketing people talking to partner marketing people, but their ownership is fuzzy. Still working, but so in those early sort of messy times of partnerships, I'm just wondering, what does successful ownership look like between marketing and sales? And I'm asking so that we can avoid some landmines and just shorten that cycle. Thank you.
Sure. I mean, this is very typical, like organizational. Well, the way that I've always seen it is that, the alliance manager responsible for the partnership owns that strategy. What do we want to do with them? What are the technical integrations? How are we overlapping what we each want from our company and the partner company? What are those intersection points? Or really defining what good looks like and the gives and gets. The alliance manager owns that. And then what they need to do is partner with marketing, and then how do we then amplify that and market the partnership together? What are the different activities that we want to do together? How do we track success for those? How do we negotiate with the partner on being able to contribute what we want them to contribute to this partnership? And so I see it as like there's an overall partnership strategy, and then there's kind of that marketing piece that it plugs into that overall strategy. But that's always been kind of a give and get with both teams. I don't know if there's anything.
The one thing I would add, I mean, we talk about PLG motion or SLG motion or MLG motion and now ELG motion or partner-led motion, right? Get away from that for a second. Look at your end customer. The important thing is all these XLGs, I'm gonna call them, right? As long as you have a cohesive approach to how all these things are intertwined, and they have to be and they will be intertwined just by the nature of how your customers are expecting to engage, right? And removing that friction. Don't look at it as, oh, it's PLG versus sales SLG. So how do we accelerate each other? How do we augment each other? How do we help each other in a cohesive way? Give you a quick example, right? One of the things that we launched at part of the ecosystem partner strategy at Vectara was a startup program. It's like, come in, we want to enable you, empower you to build, on Vectara, but then there was potential friction that I started, I wanted to make sure that we don't, catch to get ahead of is, I don't want the sales team to go and look at, this program is competing with their potential selling motion, SLG versus ELG. I'm like, no, screw that. There's no SLG versus LLG. There is together one cohesive approach. We're going to have one entry point, again, removing that friction for the end customer, one entry point for our startups, the startups that want to engage with Vectara, and internal we'll figure out how do we align best. Again, no ELG, VSLG, MLG. It's how do we complement each other, augment each other. And I think the onus is on the go-to-market leaders to really think about this holistic approach versus separate, siloed approaches.
Awesome. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today.